Welcome everybody, Mark Clayton with A Road Less Traveled. Today we dyno a motor, stab it in the chassis, and set the body. Stay tuned. What we've got is a 1931 Auburn Model 898A 8-cylinder engine going in our Speedster project. What we're doing is after we get it all hooked up here to the dyno is we do the tuning, the run-in, make sure that all of our sensors are saying the right thing, and it's just basically a lot of back and forth for a little while getting the thing tuned up right. We also run it for about an hour minimally just to make sure that everything is running just like it should before we actually start making some pulls. On this particular motor we had a lot of little things to take care of, oil leaks and tuning of the carburetor, which the original carburetor on these 898s is a pain in the butt, so we've got a Carter carburetor on there that works much better. We also developed a leak in our fuel pump which we had to get fixed, and that was a welding operation on the fuel pump housing. And then we just start monitoring it, we're running it up and down, and then eventually we will put loads on it, and we'll do that as long as it takes to get the engine broke in, number one, which usually happens within about 10 pulls. And then number two is getting it all tuned up right. Well, then comes the long process of removing all the probes and everything from the motor and getting it back off of the dyno. It generally takes about 8 hours to put one all together on the dyno, and just generally takes about 30-45 minutes to get it back off of there again. Drain all the fluids back out of it, and it's just kind of a big watery mess. But in your dyno room, if you've got the right plumbing and stuff, it makes it very easy. So we just unhook all the parts, get the front cooling tower off of the front of the motor, and that makes it really nice that we don't have to have a radiator on them. That cooling tower is fabulous. The quick detach off of the dyno with the cart, pop the drive shaft off, and we just roll them right off. Then we roll the transmission and the freewheel unit that's already attached over to the body shop. And that's where we have the big jib crane, and that's where our life gets really easy. What we do now is we make sure everything is nice and clean, and we get the pilot bearing in there with a little bit of sleeve retainer. Not totally necessary, but it's a nice insurance policy. So we go ahead and tap that thing in there, and they're generally a nice, easy kind of slip fit, I'll call it. Just a little bit tighter than a slip fit is perfect on those things. They don't need to be a press fit, they rarely are. So we just tap them in there. We use the back side of our alignment tool for our clutch, and there we go. Nothing to it. Boy, isn't that a nice work that Fort Wayne Clutch does for us on these clutches. So there's our alignment tool. We stick it in there, or if you happen to have an output shaft, an input shaft on the transmission, you can use that also. Here we're looking for the timing marks to make sure we get everything right. When we balance them up, we put a mark on them, but I forgot to put a mark on the face side. So we found it with a mirror, and then now we know where to bolt up the pressure plate to the flywheel because everything was balanced. So we go ahead and just put a little dab of Loctite on those bolts. I don't like to over torque them. They sometimes break, and what a pain in the tail. Then you got to pull the flywheel back off. So we just put just a drop of Loctite on them so we can get them back off if we have to, but it takes some wrenching to do it. So we got the clutch disc all aligned. We'll go ahead and tie down the pressure plate, and then comes the arm wrestle of the transmission into the engine, which is kind of nice to have a couple of guys around. I can do this by myself with the overhead jib crane, but with a couple of guys to help us, it sure is nice to do it. So we got Ignacio and Chuck there and myself, and we raise the thing up there and just sort of nurse it on. You have to be a little bit careful here because you certainly don't want to bend anything in that clutch disc, so it's just kind of working it back and forth a little bit, making sure that everything is aligned right, and then all of a sudden when you get that splines lined up just right, she'll just pop on. So it makes it easy work of it. And then once we get the transmission mated up to the back end, then the next thing to do is get the chains hooked up and get it off of the dyno cart. We're using the overhead jib crane again. It's a 4,000-pound jib crane, and this load leveler that I built that has bearings everywhere in it, you could just use your fingers to turn it. It's so nice. It was one of the best things I did when I built this shop. Was I put in several jib cranes. This one happens to be a really big one, 4,000 pounder with that load leveler. There's almost nothing in the car world that we can't do. When I put this in, I had a ceremony and threw my cherry picker in the dump. I hated that thing, and I had a real big one. It was always under your feet, and you're always concerned about lifting the engine out, and you've got that one cylinder there. That just made me nervous as heck, so I was sure glad to get rid of the thing. And we have jib cranes in all of the shops. It's really a nice luxury to have. We do a huge variety of cars here, although they're all classics, a lot of different makes and models. So we're always having to make a few adjustments on the fly. And as we were lowering this engine into the chassis, we discovered that we couldn't get it in unless we removed either the steering column or the clutch pedal. The clutch pedal was a lot easier way to go, so we pulled the clutch pedal off and then just settled the thing right into the frame. Gary came by and gave us a hand, and we even had Ignacio standing there kind of staring at us for a minute. Didn't help, but at least we had a peanut gallery. Well, it's sort of push here and shove there, and eventually the thing kind of settles down into the frame. Seems like you always have to get out your pry bar and push it just a little bit one way or the other because the hole doesn't exactly line up, and it's just easier to shove the engine over that way. So then we'll just gather up the hardware and go ahead and get her fastened on into the frame. Well, everybody went home for the day, so I got things teed up for the next morning, which was mount the body. So I moved it into position underneath the jib crane a little bit nicer, and then I took off on getting the webbing down on the frame. A lot of times we have to use seat belt material. It's not my favorite. Originally they had a nice cotton webbing material, but the only thing that they make today is really thick, and it just doesn't work real well for us. So and it usually comes green nowadays, so I like the black, but boy is it hard to punch holes in this seat webbing material. So we sharpen up our punch, and then we kind of struggle here and there, eventually get it. Well, once the holes are punched, all in the locations for the body mount bolts, then I put a little spray glue on the back side of them, and that way I can just stick it down to the frame. It doesn't move around. That way when you're jockeying the body down, at least you don't have to fight the frame webbing too. I gathered up the big boss to come out here and help me early the next morning, so it was nice having him help me push the body in position. It's going to be a center point, so we're going to have to see how it goes. I've never tried this before. We normally use either the reach forklift or the loader with the big forks outside to lower these bodies onto the frame. But it was cold outside and kind of windy, and I didn't want to go out there, so what the heck. We got a jib crane, we might as well give this a shot. Besides, what's the worst thing that could happen? You drop it on the ground and start all over.
towards you a hair if possible. All right, that started.
Well, that made easy work out of it. Having the right tools and equipment and a great crew, everything just drops right into place. So it's back over to the disassembly building, nestle the thing back into its bay, and then we'll have a scissor lift underneath it, which really makes it easy to assemble the rest of the car. Next we'll be putting the windshield frame on, mounting the doors, fenders, and we'll bring you that in our next episode of Building the 1931 Auburn Speedster.